What if the reason that you keep sabotaging your own progress has nothing to do with discipline? Most men, they already have a theory about why they're not where they want to be at. They assume that they need more motivation, more consistency, or stronger willpower. That's why they keep searching for a better workout plan, a better budget, a better morning routine, or a productivity system that just fixes everything. The problem is, that explanation doesn't hold up very well, because if information was the missing piece, most of us, we would have changed years ago. You already know what foods you should be eating. You already know that you should be working out more, spending less than you actually make, and not putting things off till tomorrow. Most men, their problem isn't a lack of knowledge. Men are suffering from something completely different. And that's what makes this so confusing, because there are millions of men that are continually doing things that they know are working against them. Which raises the question that most people never ask. Why would somebody willingly get in their own way? Why would somebody sabotage the progress that they genuinely want? The answer might be that your brain is solving a different problem than the one that you think. Every time that you break a promise to yourself, your brain records it, but not as a random event, but as information about who you are. And over time, those moments, they begin to stack up and they form a picture about the man that you believe yourself to be. Maybe you're the kind of man who follows through when he says he's going to do something. Maybe you're the kind of man who finishes what he starts. Or maybe after enough unfinished goals and false starts, you started to see yourself as the kind of man who always ends up back where he started. And once that picture becomes clear enough, something strange happens. Your brain, it stops trying to figure out who you are and starts trying to protect the answer. Which means that every attempt to change isn't a new habit. It's a challenge to an identity that you've reinforced for years. And if that's true, then that means the battle isn't between you and the workout, or you and the budget, or you and that side business that you keep putting off. The battle is between the person you're trying to become and the person you've proven yourself to be over the years. And that battle is happening whether you realize it or not. Most men, they can think about all the goals that they never finish. And it wasn't because those goals were impossible, but because life got in the way. A busy week turned into a busy month. An injury interrupted your workout plan. An unexpected expense wrecked your budget. That side business got pushed to the side when work got overwhelming. Individually, none of these moments seem like a big deal. In fact, most of them seem completely understandable. The problem is that your brain, it isn't evaluating these moments one at a time. It's looking for patterns. Think about how you form opinions about other people. They show up late once, you probably don't think about it. But if they show up late 20 times, you start to draw conclusions about who they are. Eventually, you start to expect them to show up late before they even arrive. And your brain, it does the same thing with you. Every time that you break a promise to yourself, give up on a goal, or restart something that you've already restarted 3 times before, your brain, it records it as evidence. Not evidence about the goal, but evidence about you. And over time, those moments start stacking together and your brain starts trying to answer a question. Is this who we really are? And at first, the answer isn't very clear. But after enough experiences, the answer starts to become obvious. And once your brain believes it has the answer, something very important happens. Your brain, it stops trying to figure out who you are and starts trying to become consistent with what it thinks. And that's where a lot of men get trapped, because once your brain has formed your identity, it starts to filter your future experiences through that same identity. A man who believes that he's disciplined, he can miss a workout and see it as just a temporary setback. But a man who believes that he always quits just sees it as confirmation that he'll never change. The event is identical, but the interpretation is completely different. See, one man thinks that he slipped, but he'll get it back tomorrow. The other man thinks, here we go again. The missed workout isn't what determines the outcome. It's the meaning that's attached to that missed workout. Because once your brain decides what kind of person you are, it starts collecting evidence that supports that decision. And that's where self-sabotage becomes much more complicated than most people realize. This is where things start getting strange. See, most people, they assume that self-sabotage means that somebody is knowingly doing something self-destructive. They imagine that somebody is intentionally ruining their own progress, but in real life, that's rarely what it looks like. In reality, self-sabotage, it usually shows up disguised as something reasonable. A man decides he's finally going to take his health serious. He plans to go to the gym after work, but then his day gets stressful. He's now mentally drained, and the couch is looking more appealing than the treadmill is. In that moment, skipping the workout, it doesn't feel like sabotage, it feels justified. And the same thing happens financially. A man commits to paying off debts, and then an unexpected expense shows up, and now he's frustrated. So he convinces himself he's already behind anyways, so he spends the money that he shouldn't have. Again, it doesn't feel like he's moving backwards. It just feels like he's responding to circumstances. That's why self-sabotage is always so hard to recognize, because it never announces itself. It doesn't say, let's ruin our future. It says, we'll start again tomorrow, or now isn't the right time. The reason that those explanations sound so convincing is because they're protecting something that's much deeper. They're protecting an identity. Underneath all of these situations, the same battle is taking place. The version of you that's trying to build a better life is attempting to move forward, but the version of you that has been reinforced by years of past experiences is trying to pull you back to what feels familiar. And that's what makes this battle so exhausting. And what makes it even harder is that both sides, they sound exactly like you. One side is focused on the future and the life that you're trying to build. The other side is focused on the past. It's always reminding you of every goal that you gave up on, every broken promise that you had. That's why that negative voice sounds so convincing, because it's had years of evidence behind it. It remembers all of the unfinished goals, all of the broken promises to yourself, and all those times that you really thought things were going to be different, just for you to end up back in the same place again. From your brain's perspective, all of that history is more reliable than hope. That's why self-sabotage, it isn't a discipline problem, it's an identity problem. This is the part that makes self-sabotage so difficult to recognize, because most men, they just assume that they would know if it was happening. They imagine resistance showing up as something obvious. They think it would sound negative or destructive. But that's not how it really works. And the reason that self-sabotage is so effective is because it speaks in your own voice. When the alarm goes off at 5:30 in the morning, resistance, it doesn't announce itself as resistance. It presents itself as a reasonable argument. It reminds you that you didn't sleep well. It points out that you've got a long day ahead of yourself. It suggests that one extra day won't make much of a difference, that tomorrow you'll be in a better position. None of those thoughts sound irrational. In fact, most of them sound reasonable. The same thing happens when it's time for you to work on that goal that you've been talking about for months. Resistance doesn't tell you to stay stuck. It tells you that you've earned a break. It tells you that the garage can wait till tomorrow, or that budget can wait till the weekend. And because those explanations sound reasonable, most people never stop to question them. Instead, they spend years believing that they're fighting motivation or circumstances, but it's actually much deeper than that. They're fighting an identity that's trying to stay consistent. And from your brain's perspective, consistency creates safety. Even if your current habits are producing results that you don't want, they're still familiar, and your brain already knows what to expect from them. The future version of you, he may be healthier, wealthier, or more successful, but it's also less predictable. And uncertainty, it creates discomfort. That's why progress feels uncomfortable before it feels rewarding. You're challenging a version of yourself that's been reinforced for years. And any time that you challenge something that's been reinforced for years, resistance is inevitable. The most dangerous thing about an identity is that it doesn't feel like it's an identity. It feels like reality. Think about a man who has spent the last 10 years starting and stopping. He started diets. He started workout plans, started budgets. He started that side business. Most of them begin with excitement and good intentions. He wasn't trying to fail, and he wasn't planning to quit. He fully believed that this time was going to be different, but most of the attempts, they didn't last. And at first, they were simply just events. A failed diet is an event. A missed workout is an event. An abandoned goal is an event. But eventually, the brain, it starts connecting all these events to become a pattern. And once it finds a pattern, it starts to build a conclusion that maybe I'm not the kind of person that follows through. And that right there is where the real shift happens. Because once a belief gets repeated enough times, it no longer feels like a belief, it starts feeling like a fact. And facts, they never get questioned. The statement that I always quit, it no longer sounds like an opinion, it sounds like reality. Something feels real, your brain starts to organize behavior around it. And it's not because you're weak, it's not because you're lazy, because people, they naturally behave in a way that aligns with what they believe to be true. That's why a man who believes he's bad with money doesn't want to look at his bank account. A man who believes that he'll never get in shape finds reasons to skip the gym. A man who believes that he doesn't follow through, he'll find ways to quit before he even begins. The behavior feels different in each situation, but underneath it, the same mechanism is operating. People tend to act in ways that are consistent with their identity. That's why it's so hard to change your life. You're not just fighting habits. You're fighting conclusions that have been reinforced for years, and the longer those conclusions existed, the more evidence they have behind it. That's why self-sabotage feels so personal, because it doesn't feel like it's an enemy, it feels like it's you. This is where a lot of men get discouraged. They assume that once they start making progress, that the battle should get easier. They think that after a few weeks of consistency, that they'll feel more motivated, more confident, and just completely different. But that's usually not what happens. In many cases, the resistance, it gets louder. A man who starts waking up earlier, he starts tracking his spending. He starts going to the gym consistently, and for the first few weeks, everything feels good. And out of nowhere, he gets this urge to quit. And it's not because the plan isn't working, it's because his old identity is being challenged. The mistake that most men make is assuming that their resistance means something is wrong. They think that discomfort means that they're failing. In reality, discomfort is just evidence that something is changing. Think about it this way. If you spent 10 years believing that you were the kind of person that never followed through, your brain's not going to abandon that belief after just 2 weeks of you keeping promises to yourself. It needs time, it needs evidence. It needs repeated proof that something is different now. That's why lasting change is much slower than most people expect. You're not just changing behavior, you're changing the story that your brain has been telling you about for years. And every time that you follow through when you don't feel like it, you're adding a new piece of evidence to your story. Every workout, every dollar saved, every promise kept. Those moments, they might feel small, but together, they're building a new identity for you. And eventually, that same brain that resisted change, it starts to expect it. If you're a man that's tired of starting over, tired of feeling stuck, tired of fighting the same battles over and over again, then hit that subscribe button. Every week, I break down the hidden patterns that are keeping men trapped, so now you can finally start moving forward. At the beginning of this video, I asked you to consider the possibility that the reason you keep sabotaging your progress has nothing to do with discipline. Maybe the real problem is that your brain has spent years building an identity that it's now trying to protect. If that's true, what a lot of people call self-sabotage starts making a lot of sense. The missed workout, the abandoned goals, the budget that only lasts a few weeks. Most of the time, those things aren't happening because somebody lacks information, and they're not happening because somebody's incapable of change. They're happening because your brain is trying to remain consistent with what it already believes. That's why lasting change requires more than motivation. It requires evidence. Evidence that you're capable of following through. Evidence that you're no longer the person that created these results that you're trying to leave behind. The morning that you got up when you didn't feel like it. That workout that you completed when nobody would have blamed you for skipping it. Those moments, they might seem small when they happen, but they're not, because every one of those is casting a vote for the person that you're becoming. And over time, the evidence grows and the identity changes. That's why the question, it isn't whether you're becoming somebody new. The only question is whether your daily actions are reinforcing the life that you want or reinforcing the life that you're trying to escape. And the answer to that question is written by the choices that you make today.